Pinocchio was perhaps the main film I was talking about in my video announcing this series, when I said that there were some Disney films that I remember loving as a kid, but haven't seen in a while. I actually wanted to just watch Pinocchio, and after I decided to watch it again, I got the idea of reviewing every Disney movie. So this really is the film I wanted to see the most. In case you haven't seen it, Pinocchio is about a puppet that is given life after his creator, a wood carver named Geppetto, wishes to a star to make him a real boy. The Blue Fairy gives Pinocchio life, and tells him that in order to become a real boy, he must become brave, truthful, and unselfish. She then assigns a cricket named Jiminy to be his conscience. But Pinocchio, having the spirit of a little boy, while also being a blank slate, is led astray by temptations, and it's up to Jiminy to show Pinocchio the errors of his ways. And upon seeing them, it becomes Pinocchio's responsibility to learn from his mistakes in order to become a real boy. I have more of a history with Pinocchio than I do with Snow White. Unlike Snow White, I owned a copy of Pinocchio on VHS when I was probably about 4. I remember watching it a lot and really liking it. But then my VCR broke and my parents made the transition to DVD. I didn't watch it again. Around the time this was happening was when Disney was releasing their films on DVD and calling them, I think, the Special Edition. I was around 6 years old, and it was then that I watched films like The Lion King and Aladdin for the first time. And at that point, the 2 Disney films I'd watched the most were Pinocchio and Peter Pan. And for some reason, my parents never bought Pinocchio on DVD, although they bought several other DVDs, including Peter Pan. And because of this, I didn't watch Pinocchio for over a decade until the other day. Even though I hadn't seen it in a long time, I still remembered a lot about it, and had fond memories. For most of my life, I would have said that Pinocchio is one of my 5 favorite Disney films. But my opinions changed after watching Pinocchio again. And I mean that in the most positive way imaginable. It isn't just a top 5 Disney movie for me, it shot up to number 1. I thought it'd be fun to rank the top 10 Disney movies when I've seen them all, and it still will be, but I'm going to be honest, I don't see another film topping Pinocchio. Now, it isn't impossible. I only remember about 10 or so Disney films with complete detail, so there may be one that challenges it after I familiarize myself with all of them, but it's going to be tough. But any film is going to have a hard time competing with Pinocchio. I don't use the word flawless very often, but I'm going to use it here. From the story, the pacing, the characters, the songs, even the animation, there is nothing that this film could improve upon. Snow White was a great first film, but Pinocchio is a masterpiece, and one of the all-time great films. I said in my Snow White review that simple stories could still result in great movies, and that's exactly what we have here. A simple setup with simple situations following it. But it works so very well. I said it worked well in Snow White, but it didn't work perfectly. I think the thing that Pinocchio does that Snow White didn't is present, while still simple, more interesting characters than Snow White does. There isn't anything complex about Pinocchio or Jiminy, but they still manage to be 2 of Disney's most iconic and greatest characters. While they're very simple, they're given personalities that make them feel real. Pinocchio may not be very smart, but it's hard not to love this guy. His innocence and curiosity about the world around him makes him a great character. And although Pinocchio continuously gives in to temptations, and constantly doesn't listen to Jiminy, he never goes too far. He isn't ever mean to Jiminy, and he usually doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. And Pinocchio is so likable that you never tire of seeing him fall for the same tricks that result in him getting into trouble. We want him to get out of it, but I personally never found myself disliking him or getting tired of Pinocchio constantly getting into trouble. After all, the world is very new to him, and he doesn't understand that there are people out there who want to hurt him for their own benefit. And his voice actor, the recently deceased Dickie Jones, did a great job giving a voice to Pinocchio. Jiminy Cricket is also a great character. Before watching Pinocchio, I thought Jiminy would be a goody two-shoes type of character, but he wasn't. He wanted to help Pinocchio, but he also had character flaws himself. He flat out walks out on Pinocchio on 2 separate occasions. Once when he thinks Pinocchio doesn't need him anymore, and another time when he gets angry over Pinocchio calling someone other than him his best friend. These scenes give Jiminy a more dynamic personality, and make him more likable than he would have been if he had come across as, a flawless character like I was afraid he would be. And although he left Pinocchio on 2 occasions, he decides to stick with Pinocchio when he goes on a dangerous mission to rescue Geppetto from the belly of a whale. And this also helps to make a good character, because him sticking with Pinocchio, to me, sort of brings his character full circle. We see Jiminy as a loner at the beginning, and the only reason he decides to help Pinocchio in the first place is because he sort of gets pressured into it by the Blue Fairy. So it was great to see him stay by Pinocchio's side during Pinocchio's dangerous dive into the sea. The other characters are really good too. Geppetto, while not very involved as a character from a story standpoint, other than wishing for Pinocchio to be real, of course, is still a very likable character. He clearly loves Pinocchio and cares for him, and because I also really like Pinocchio, I like him too. Geppetto's pets are a lot of fun too. His pet cat Figaro got several laughs out of me, and I was also amused by his fish Cleo. Pinocchio doesn't have a major villain like many other Disney films, but this is because of the episodic structure that the film has, presenting us with several villains who are trying to use Pinocchio for their own gain. But while there isn't a villain who stays on the screen for very long, in fact, the results of the villain's actions seem to take up more screen time than the villains themselves, they're still very memorable. Even though I hadn't seen the film in a long time, I remember these guys very well. The villains of Lesser Evil, and also the ones we see the most of, are the con men Honest John and Gideon, and they're a lot of fun, especially when Gideon tries to demonstrate his dark and violent nature when Honest John is trying to smoothly talk to Pinocchio into falling for a con of theirs. Stromboli is also a very fun character, but out of all the villains we see him the least. And yet it's funny that the most iconic scene of the movie happens because Stromboli sets off a chain of events that leads to the scene where Pinocchio's nose grows after he lies. The coachman, although probably being the least known villain from the film, is actually the most evil one. His plot of luring children to an island so that he can turn them into donkeys to sell has become a very popular element of Disney's culture. And it is a horrific plot, and I'll return to it later in the review. Now, I meant what I said when I said that there wasn't a major villain in the film, and there isn't. But I'm willing to bet that whenever you heard me say that, you immediately thought about Monstro the Whale. Like a lot of things in this film, Monstro seems to be a big deal in Disney culture, and also a very popular figure in pop culture as well. And it isn't hard to see why. He's huge and threatening, and he is, as Jiminy Cricket says, a whale of a whale. But if I'm ranking the Disney villains in terms of villain-like qualities, Monstro would be dead last in this film. He's threatening for sure, but he's just sort of being an animal the whole time. But Monstro does make the most of his time on the screen, and I'll return to him later when I dive into some of the deeper aspects of this film. I know I just did a sort of curtain call for all the characters, and I don't normally list so many characters like I did, but every character in this film is so good that they're all worth mentioning. But this isn't just a film with great characters. The story of Pinocchio, while not very complex, sets up a wide variety of situations that all come together to make a great film. Yes, I know Pinocchio is based off a book, but Disney could have still screwed it up. But thankfully, they did not. One issue I had with Snow White was that, when all was said and done, nothing much had happened. I can't say the same about Pinocchio. While the setup is probably even simpler than Snow White's, Pinocchio goes through a lot on his journey to become a real boy. Whether it's performing on a stage, or smoking and drinking on an island of mischief, or going into the belly of a whale to save his father, Pinocchio goes through a lot over the course of this film, and every scene, and I mean every single one, is memorable. There's at least one thing in every scene that keeps that scene etched in my memory. I'm not sure I can say that about any other Disney film, and very few films in general, and I can count on one hand the other animated films that are as impactful to me as Pinocchio. Once again, I am not taking the release date into consideration when reviewing these movies' stories. That hurts Snow White. But it actually helps Pinocchio, because it's clear to me that this story, though not original, is presented by Disney in such a way that makes it timeless. And while the story to Snow White is timeless, I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like the writers weren't comfortable in writing more things for Snow White to do. You know, she sort of just didn't do much, to be honest. But the writing in Pinocchio is much better, which causes Snow White to feel a bit dated, while Pinocchio feels timeless. One thing that struck me about Pinocchio was just how dark the overall film is. For example, the kids who get turned into donkeys aren't ever saved. At least we aren't ever led to believe that they are. And the scenes with Monstro are scarier than anything Disney's put out in a very long time. I think it's funny that I say that simple films can still be great ones, but like most great films that are simple, there are elements in the film that are anything but. An example of this is Pinocchio's change in the last third of the film. After discovering that Geppetto's been eaten by Monstro the Whale, Pinocchio immediately decides to save him, without any fear. Even Jiminy can't believe that Pinocchio is going to confront Monstro. As far as an intelligence standpoint is concerned, Pinocchio isn't any smarter than he was before, and I think he's too naive to be called brave. But it isn't bravery that he's relying on. I think what's driving Pinocchio in these scenes is the love he has for his father. This is never stated, but it was clear to me while watching the film that Pinocchio loves his father very much, and it turns out that he loves him so much that he's willing to go to very dangerous extremes to save him. I mentioned earlier that Jiminy, who is a loner earlier in the film, decides to accompany Pinocchio in his search for Monstro, and that this showed an arc coming to a close. That arc, I believe, is Jiminy learning to truly care for people other than himself. So if Pinocchio's love for Geppetto causes him to go after Monstro, Jiminy's love for Pinocchio causes him to go with Pinocchio in his search. Now, of course, the three things Pinocchio needed to obtain to become a real boy were bravery, truthfulness, and selflessness. He does obtain these traits, but I think his love for Geppetto helped him greatly to do it. I think it's funny that what is, in my opinion, one of the great arcs in Disney history that concerns one of Disney's favorite elements, love, is never addressed. If Pinocchio had been made in recent years, Disney would have made sure the entire audience clearly understood what I just explained to you. Of course, I could be wrong in my assumptions about the love in this film. Heck, it's possible that what I just explained never crossed Walt's or anyone else's mind while making the film. And that's the beauty of film, though. We can all interpret things differently, and what I was saying about love was what I was thinking while watching the film. So I accept this element in the film to be true. And after seeing this film, I find that the love in it is more real than most other Disney films that openly show it to the audience. It's funny how Monstro, as menacing as he is really just a plot device to help Pinocchio become a real boy. Having a creature as threatening as he is makes Pinocchio's very memorable rescue of Geppetto all the more impressive. Really, Monstro could have been a variety of things, but a giant, threatening whale was a good choice by Disney. Or, the writer or whoever it was. And while I do believe that he is more of a plot device than an actual villain, Monstro is still a very memorable villain, and justifiably so. His design is great, and he is clearly a force to be reckoned with. The term Disney magic is used a lot. I've often rolled my eyes when I've heard it, since I honestly don't find a lot of Disney films magical. I do some, but not others. But Pinocchio, I can undoubtedly say, is magical. It evokes feelings from me that only my all-time favorite films do, and it does so while staying a perfect movie, and I mean perfect. As I said before, I don't see a single thing in this film that could have been improved upon. Not one. That is very rare for a film to do. I said that the animation for Snow White was very good, considering the time it was released. Well, Pinocchio's is easily better. I'm no artist, so I can't really add to that, but it looks a whole lot better to me. And if you can't tell, I think that Pinocchio just completely overpowers Snow White in terms of greatness. And I gave Snow White a very favorable review, and I stick by it. It's a great movie, but I believe that it's just out of its league when it comes to Pinocchio. But I don't blame it. Most films are. I'm not sure this film gets credit for it, but Pinocchio was actually the film that started what would become a huge part of Disney, which is having one's dreams come true. So really it could be argued that from a historical standpoint, Pinocchio is the most important Disney feature. Well, aside from Snow White, of course, being the first. My favorite scene in the film is also its most iconic one. Yeah, it's the one where Pinocchio's nose grows. Sorry to be so predictable. But that scene captured my imagination when I was a child, and it has stuck with me ever since. And it's probably my favorite Disney scene right now. We'll have to see how it holds up after I've seen every film, and don't worry, my favorite scene won't be as predictable with every other Disney film. I'm going to cheat in naming my favorite character. I have to give it to both Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket. These guys are great, and they play off each other perhaps better than any other Disney duo. Well, there's another duo that may be better, and I'll reveal who they are when I get to the film. But I really like these guys, so I have to give it to both. But there'll typically be one decisive character in the future. My favorite song has got to be When You Wish Upon a Star. Again, sorry for being so predictable, but it really is a great song, and it pretty much sums up what a lot of Disney films would be about in the future, which is having your dreams come true. However, every song in this film is good. There don't seem to be very many, though. It seems like Disney decided to have pretty much every song in the first half and hardly any in the second, but the songs that are in the film are very good. Since the review was so long, I'm not going to throw in much trivia fluff, although I do want to say this. Mel Blanc, the legendary voice actor, was supposed to voice the character of Gideon until it was decided to make him mute, and strangely enough, he was supposed to voice Dopey in Snow White before he was made mute. And the only Mel Blanc voice contribution in Disney history is when Gideon burps while he, Honest John, and the coachman are talking inside of the tavern. I find that interesting, and also pretty funny. Before I end my review, I want to make something very clear. Very few of my reviews will be anywhere near this length. Most will be about the length of Snow White's review. But there was just so many great things in Pinocchio to talk about that I simply had to talk in length about it. If you can't tell, I really enjoyed Pinocchio. More so than I even expected to, and I expected to like it a lot. I still have about 50 Disney films to watch, but it's going to be hard to find a film that tops it or even comes close. I only talk a lot about films I really enjoyed, and typically the longer I talk about them, the more I like them. After watching Pinocchio, it has shot up to the top of my favorite Disney films list by a mile. At least for now, and it probably will stay there, to be honest. And it's in the company of my favorite films of all time, both animated and live action. Perfect in every way, Pinocchio is a masterpiece and gets a perfect 5 stars out of 5, and I would give it 6 stars if I could. Thank you for watching, and I hope you continue to when my reviews are shorter.